we're going to be taking this R7 for a quick ride. It's so new, but it still has this on the screen. Right, so had a nice little intro there. Unfortunately, we had some audio issues with the GoPro and the mic setup that we have. Hopefully, next time, the next review that we do, we can run it kind of more like it's supposed to. But for now, you're just going to get this voiceover while we ride the bike. We're taking out the Yamaha R7. Now, this is the LAMS, or Learner Approved Motorcycle Scheme version of the Yamaha R7. So what the Learner Approved Motorcycle Scheme in Australia is, or at least most of the eastern states, is for learners. The rules are the motorcycle cannot be any greater than 660 cc in engine capacity with a power to weight ratio of 150 kilowatts per tonne. So the R7 internationally is a 689 cc bike. For the learner approved bike, or the LAMS bike, which I'll be referring it to a LAMS bike, is a 655 cc with a few other restrictions in place to make it meet the power to weight ratio. So the restrictions on this are the throttle only opens to approximately 60%. So there's a restriction plate on the throttle bodies themselves, as well as restriction on the intake. So the velocity stacks or the intake trumpets have a breathing restrictor in it. So unlike what a couple other manufacturers do for like A2 and A3 licensing, say in the UK, where it's all through the ECU, with the LAMS R7, it's just done through the throttle restriction as well as the intake restriction, and then having a completely different bore ratio and piston. It's going to be a little different to, say, running the HO. So in Australia, the 689cc model is called the HO. They're kind of few and far between for the MT-07 and the R7. We're riding the learner variety of the bike, or learner variation of the bike. The good thing about it is, other than those restrictions, it is the same bike. So it's the same chassis, it's the same suspension, the same braking package. You can see it's the same dash. So my initial impressions I got on the bike, and instantly it feels pretty good. It is a tighter coupled bike than the SV650s and the Ninja 650s or the Z650s that I've ridden before. The one bike kind of in this group that I haven't ridden in either learner or full power guys is the RS 660 from Aprilia. Hopefully we'll get a ride on one of them in the future. But for now, I'm just going to compare back to other bikes kind of in the class that have built the class up through generations. So we have the map there from Woolwich. These bikes on Woolwich's dyno made that 50 odd horsepower, which is a 37 odd kilowatts for our European viewers. And that you can see in that graph, that's where that restriction comes in. It builds up just as the full capacity bike would, and then tapers off with the restriction. The ECU mapping is all the same, so your ignition, fueling, everything like that between the LAMS bike and the HO. They're all the same. It's just the actual bore and then the two physical restrictions on the bike which limit it. You'll see me throughout the test ride running it through the gears, short shifting to keep it in that torque. Compared to, say, a race bike or the de-restricted bike, there's no, well, you can rev it out, but there's no real point in revving it out a super long way because it kind of runs out of steam. That being said, it is still a pretty lively motor. Now, this bike, as you saw at the beginning, absolutely brand new. Had less than 300 meters rolling around in the shop on the dash. So I was being careful with brakes, with tires, because they were all brand new. And instantly though, I was pretty impressed with that motor. Just hooks up from nice and low and accelerates away. Now, you saw me going through traffic a little bit. The thing is super narrow, super nimble, very confidence inspiring. So just straight away, I was able to go straight down the middle. So by this point, we'd done a little bit of riding, 20 odd Ks or so. And just so everyone knows, as for size, I'm just shy of 6'1" and about 110 kilos, give or take, in gear. So that's about, 230 pounds. So I'm not a small guy by any stretch of the imagination. And I actually found the R7 to be very comfortable. Yes, it's the most sporting in body position. It's definitely way more sporty than the Ninja 650, the Fed Kawasaki. It's even more sporting again than the SV650X, which is kind of their cafe racer. And again, I've not ridden the RS660, but I've sat on one, and they are pretty open compared to this. This is definitely more on the sporting end of the scale. That being said, pretty comfortable. Handlebar to crutch ratio is a lot tighter than, say, my R6s were that I had, meaning you're not on your wrists as much, because for me, bars are a lot closer to me. The bum to peg ratio, perfectly fine for me, adequate. I really like it. And the seat's actually really nice. Compared to my SV1000 road bike, it's actually more plush. The suspension is really impressive. Really good feedback, very compliant. Now, the Australian roads have changed quite a lot in the last few months, especially, which one of the reasons we did the roads that we are doing because it's our local kind of test route, and also gives you a mix and match of all of the roads that we're going to be riding on. So accelerating up here, the bike actually gets off the corner really well. Again, with the restrictions in place, you think it would kind of feel a bit breathless. Compared to even the SV650 that I've ridden, while I kind of had to get used to the parallel twin being, even though that it's the 270-degree crank to make it feel like a V-twin, it still has a very, very different feel to my SV650 race bikes, naturally. But it gets off the corner and goes really well, makes great torque. Again, with the restrictions, I was kind of thinking it might be a bit lackluster, like the Lams SV650 is, but it actually does feel a lot stronger down there. Is it because there's 10cc more? I don't really think, there's always the talk of there's no replacement for displacement, but that's not really much at all. As you saw there, some of that stretch of road that we were on isn't the nicest in the world, and I'm very, very surprised by the suspension. The bike feels very good. Again, the suspension is designed for a much lighter weight rider than I am. We didn't adjust anything with this bike other than the brake lever, adjusting it into where I like to feel. I adjusted nothing with the bike and straight out the door. Very comfortable, very confidence inspiring, and that suspension, that's probably what I'm surprised the most about. Patchwork roads, and it really takes it in its stride. Now, I do know these roads very well, so I can kind of prepare myself a bit for the bumps initially at the start of this ride. I was trying to avoid them just in case the suspension was really harsh, but if I'm being perfectly honest, it's very, very good suspension. Everyone says, oh, it's a budget bike or it's a middle-class bike. It's not really what it is. Yamaha, while it's not a replacement for the R6, sports bike guys, it's also not like a bargain basement bike. You've got fully adjustable forks, fully adjustable shock, very good Brembo master cylinder, and it's a very, very good base package. Anyone see the plane taking off there out of the Oaks Airfield? Used to do a lot of flying out of there when I was a kid. It's where I rode my first motorcycle. I used to fly there from as a kid, and now I fly out of the seat on racetracks. So yeah, this is kind of one of the first really nice twisty sections of road. We've now bedded the brakes in, we've bedded the tyres in. They were the brand new Bridgestone S22s. And this gave me my first kind of real impression of how the bike really handles and what feel there is. You see me coming through here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish different changes in tarmac there. And then the flip-flop here onto a very corrugated, bumpy bit of road. And then here, lots of really nice billiard table, smooth, grippy tar where you can kind of wind it open a bit. So through there, that's where I kind of really got my first bit of surprising feedback from the bike, where I kind of, my eyes were open. The suspension feels good, while it's probably a little bit soft realistically for the track at the moment. For these bumpy roads, excellent. The tyre in combination of those brilliant Bridgestone S22s, I'd never ridden on them before. Yes, we race on the Bridgestone slicks, but they're different tyres from the road. And then the chassis, the geometry setup of the R7, really, really worked through there. So I could feel the changes in tar. You could feel the tyres slip a little bit, but it wasn't like an emergency whoop like you are on track where you feel the front starting to go. It was just, yep, you could feel that there was a change in tar and a change in grip level, but the bike didn't wander, the bike didn't have any issues, so I was really happy with that and surprised by that, if I'm being perfectly honest. And then on the transition onto the corrugated bit of road, my SV1000 does not like that bit of road at all. It bucks and weaves and ties itself in knots. The R7 with its suspension, the way it's set from Yamaha, just ate it up. You could see there wasn't really too much negative feedback from the bike. It didn't bump me all over the joint. Able to get into the gas really hard and push on through that corner. And then moving up into the long sweeping left, with the nice smooth tyre, you're able to just peel it in, open it up and send it through. Now, having the LAMS motor with some of the restriction, you don't have to be, as an experienced rider, you don't have to be as gentle with the throttle as you would maybe the full power model. But you can still catch yourself unawares, which is why I really pushed through there on those bumps to see if it started to move, if it started to have issues with the shock, especially under hard acceleration, and it didn't have a problem whatsoever. It's not as smooth as the camera makes it look. It's quite bumpy. And the bike at speed, while it's, I think it's about 2 inches shorter than the SV650 that we race, some people have said that it feels unstable. I found it to be perfectly adequate when it came to stability. Is that because of my extra weight? Maybe. But for me, I found it to be perfectly fine sending it through this higher speed section. Some people have called for putting a steering damper on it, that sort of thing. I had no issues whatsoever. I have heard some people complain of issues with the fairing or, wind buffeting. I was copping it, again, I'm 6'1", sat upright, I was copping it at, about chest height. No issue with me. And here we are at Bargarang Lookout. So on a sunny day like this, you'll quite often get a lot of bikes up here. And as you can see, there's quite a few bikes. That being said, though, it was only about 11 degrees Celsius ambient temperature in the morning, probably about 15 degrees here. That little gesture was me testing the ABS on the gravelly ground. So the roadway in and out of this lookout had been resurfaced. Gives a lot of feedback in the gravel, which is pretty funny. So I want to talk about where I see this bike. Obviously, we race the Suzuki SV650, have done for years, and have been really pushing for this class of bike to come through in the world. In the shift in market share for motorcycles, we can see now you've got the likes of this R7. You've got the likes of the RS660 coming in and kind of filling the gap where the old 600cc bikes used to be. You just need to look at World SBK and see they have the 1000cc superbikes. Now they have Super Sport next generation with your V2 Panigales, 765 triples and very hot rod 600cc bikes. And in certain markets, you have the Gixxer 750. They're pretty much running superbike power and capacity from the early 90s. And then the base class is 300. So there's a massive gap between a 300, like a 50 horsepower 300 and a 130 horsepower 600, 750, 950. To have a bike filling the role of the super sport bikes that no longer exist on the road, this segment's really coming into its own. Nice little torquey V-twins, torquey parallel twins with a 270-degree crank. And they're having to bring them up from that budget spec. So while I love the SV650, it is definitely a far more budget-based bike, much the same with the Kawasaki, than this Yamaha R7. This has got beautiful upside-down forks, a nice shock, really good Brembo master cylinder. I was very surprised by how good that brake feels. It's better than the R6 master cylinders I run on my SVs. And then those brakes, those calipers are very good as well. It does have ABS, so there is that bit of a sponge there, but it's not too bad. Now here's a really good test of the suspension. There's a big wallow in the road there and handled it no issue. Just stood out of the seat like I normally would, hit that bump, bike didn't shake the bars, it just went on through. So here we have a bit of a kind of race launch just to see how the bike pulls off the line. And in fairness, it pulls very well considering it has all those restrictions in place. 0 to 80 k's an hour or 80 kilometers per hour. Probably better than or equal to my SV1000 just because it gets off the line so easy. And it gets off the line super easy because it has a very, very lightweight clutch. It has a slipper clutch as well, not as effective as a race bike slipper clutch, but the clutch is so lightweight and so easy to modulate and so easy to use that you just dump it and absolutely fly through the gears. The motor's got a lot of torque down low, so for that sort of thing, it just absolutely blew me away that it was able to accelerate so quickly. We're not running the quick shifter on this bike. It doesn't have the Yamaha quick shifter. It's just the old throttle cut for us. And yeah, even though we have that LAMS motor and that LAMS restriction, it pulled off the line very well. So the lightweight clutch, it's fairly comfortable ergonomics, combined with that seat and how narrow the bike is, I think it'd make a very, very good commuter. Like I do an hour to and from work, I'd happily ride this to and from work every day. It'd just make life very easy. So one thing about this bike, it does have a fairly aggressive rider triangle. On all of the class competitors that I've ridden, ground clearance is a bit of an issue. You go around a corner, around a roundabout, something like that, and you start dragging either the hero knobs off the foot pegs or your boot, something like that. You saw me pretty aggressively side-to-siding it back there. I never touched anything down. While going through some of the tighter stuff, if I was wearing leathers and had knee sliders on, for sure I would have been able to have my knee on the floor. So ground clearance is not an issue. The not dragging feet, not dragging the peg anywhere. Considering has hero knobs on it that are 3 inches long, I thought, well, maybe it could have some kind of ground clearance issues, but none that I discovered at any rate. So pulling up with the lights on the way back to the bike shop. We have an MT-07 over here. Pulls a nice big wheelie, which that had a P-plate hanging off the back, so it should ostensibly be the same motor that's in this bike, and has proven to be just a immensely popular motor around the world. You got the MT-07 or FC-07 in America, with the R7s and the T7 Tenere. The thing is a very good base package. Now, one thing, I have ridden the MT-07s as well, with their standard way-up forks and the slightly less rigid frame. I very much didn't like the MT-07. I didn't get on with it at all. The SV650 is a far better bike than the MT-07. Yamaha has taken all of that information on board, especially when it comes to guys racing it in the UK and in Twins Cup in the US. They've changed the headstock angle, they've made the frame quite a lot stiffer, and you're running those USD forks, which very, very impressive. And those brakes as well, they even outdo the MT-07 brakes. So those chassis modifications, the ergos, and the better suspension definitely make this bike a premium bike at what is realistically a fairly budget price, less than $15,000 right away. So that's it. We've pulled up to home base at On Two Wheels. I'd like to thank the team there at On Two Wheels, Gregory Hills, the two Adams, Nathan and Mitch, for allowing us the opportunity to take the bike out for a good 100k stretch of the legs and let us do this review. So again, thanks very much, guys.
So where does that leave us? Well, for the last 6 years, we've raced the Suzuki SV650s pretty competitively, won races and championships. But recently we raced against some RS660 Trofeos, and we realised that the SV is probably becoming a little bit obsolescent. And then having ridden the R7s on the road, both the LAMS and especially the HO, the high output 689cc motor, we realised that things are moving on. So we've decided to get one of these and give them a try.